Race has been the most important topic in Memphis.
Memphis, Tennessee, a city well known for its history of music, but also, more importantly, its history of racial discrimination and violence.
Memphis, Tennessee is
Memphis, Tennessee.
Breaking news about a shooting at a Memphis area grocery store.
Shot and killed, this time in Memphis, Tennessee.
Violence in the city is nothing new. It comes from a deep history of events regarding racial tensions in Memphis. One of the prime examples of this is the 1866 Memphis race riots, the origin of violence and racial discrimination in Memphis. The city of Memphis was founded in 1819 on the borders of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. The city was named after an ancient Egyptian city on the shore of the Nile River. Former United States President Andrew Jackson and other founders had great interest in the land because of its ease of transportation along the Mississippi River. The founders essentially broke the city up into 4 parts titled Exchange, Market, Court, and Auction. Throughout the early 19th century, nearly 1 million slaves were transported through Memphis and its surrounding areas. In the mid-1800s, Memphis began to establish railroads that stretched to all parts of the country. By 1857, the Memphis and Charleston Railroad was finished. This railroad stretched from the coast of South Carolina to Memphis, and at the time was the only railroad in the country that ran east to west. After slaves were imported into the area, the transportation ability of the city became extremely strong. The city of Memphis grew rapidly mainly due to its ability to produce and move cotton throughout the country's most populated areas. Before the Civil War, the city of Memphis and its surrounding areas was one of the most significant places in the country in terms of slave labor and cotton production. By 1850, Memphis was well known as the biggest inland cotton market in the world. The majority of the white population in Memphis in this period was able to have extremely profitable plantations and have success in the cotton market. After the Civil War had ended, the racial tensions in Memphis were at an all-time high. The whites were obviously furious about losing the war, but those who were able to profit extreme amounts of money off of slave labor were left with no consistent income and were infuriated by this. Because of all the racial tensions building up in Memphis since the founding of the city in 1819, the Memphis race riots of 1866 began.
In May of 1866, 1 year after the Civil War ended and the slaves were freed, mobs of white men in Memphis went on a 36-hour rampage through the city. By the time this race riot, which was by any reckoning a racial massacre, ended, approximately 4 black people had been murdered, men, women, and children. Many others had been assaulted, robbed, or raped. Every black church and every black school in the city was burned to the ground. 4 churches, 12 schools, along with nearly 100 black homes.
The riot began when a white police officer attempted to arrest a black ex-soldier, and an estimated 50 blacks showed up to stop the police from jailing him. Accounts vary as to who began the shooting, but the altercation quickly involved more and more of the city. The victims initially were only black soldiers, but the violence quickly spread to other blacks living just south of Memphis who were attacked while their homes, schools, and churches were destroyed. While Northerners who worked as missionaries and school teachers in black schools were also targeted. United States Army Commander George Stoneman ordered the black soldiers of the 3rd United States Colored Heavy Artillery Unit back to Fort Pickering, just outside the city, in an attempt to restore order, and they obeyed. Despite this, the violence persisted into the night, with the city's black population becoming the new targets. Memphis police and firefighters openly participated in the looting and violence, and as a result, The city's black residents couldn't rely on them to stop the attacks or put out the fires in African American districts. When Memphis Mayor John Park declined to seek state or federal assistance, the conflict lasted a second day. General Stoneman declared martial law on the third day's afternoon and deployed black and white troops into the city to restore order. Within a month, a congressional committee arrived to investigate the riot. The investigation and interviews were thorough, but the report was controlled by radical Republicans in Congress and used to gain support for Reconstruction policies. The report helped endorse the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, making all ex-slave citizens, and also helped increase the Republican numbers in Congress in the November 1866 elections. One testimony of the congressional committee appointed to investigate the riots was given by a black man named Albert Harris, who was a witness and victim of the riots. The testimony starts by the chairman asking Harris to state his age and residence. Harris is 53 years old and born and raised in Virginia, but says he has lived in Memphis for 12 to 14 years. And then the chairman asks him if he was a slave or a freeman, and Harris responds that he was a slave. He reveals that he is a shoemaker and lives in North Memphis and has a shoemaker's shop in the house where he lives. Harris then gets into a detailed description of what his experience was of the riots. A couple of policemen and a civilian arrived at his house and stormed in, saying that they had orders to take his weapons from his house. After Harris gave them his gun and knife, the policemen took his money as well. Harris told them not to take his money, but they said that they were allowed to do this because of the weapons they found in his house. He says that it was about 8 men altogether that stormed into his house. The same night that these men broke into Harris's house, a blacksmith shop and a church were set on fire less than 100 yards from Harris's house. Harris says that the only reason his house was not burned down was because his house was connected to a grocery store that was used by whites at the time. The Memphis race riots of 1866 had an enormous impact on the city of Memphis and the entire country after the Civil War. The riots were the first huge event regarding civil rights and racial relations after the Union defeated the Confederates. The tensions that were expressed in the Memphis race riots of 1866 have been lingering around Memphis and the entirety of the country ever since.